for connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is power. And we think about power as if it's a thing outside of ourselves. And in fact, so much of power only exists because of our complicity with it, our consensus agreement with it. And we get to take a look at that in a couple minutes. But before we get started, let's just get centered. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light, lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, energizing all your cells, all your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, and the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, power. We've got a lot of stories about power in our culture. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. I wonder what that means. You know, if we look at what does absolute power mean? And it's kind of like some of the sayings that we have about around money, you know, like that we're giving power certain inherent attributes and not calculating for or not recognizing that it is the wielding of power, it is the use or abuse of power that is a corrupting influence. Power in and of itself, it doesn't exist in and of itself outside of the context of its use, right? One of the areas of power that we tend not to exercise in its fullness is our power of choice. In order to be able to choose, we need to be able to recognize choices available to us. And in being present, in being able to see what is happening in a given moment, that presencing gives us the power to choose how we're going to respond to a situation, how we're going to integrate a situation, how we're going to interpret a situation. So our power of choice is the greatest power that we have to exercise. And when we think of power, I think we often confuse conversations of power with conversations of authority, where people are given certain authority to make particular choices. The thing is that when power is wielded, we are agreeing we are agreeing either actively or passively to honor that power. And I heard a story over the weekend of a community where people were rebelling against an authority. And the way in which they did that was to say, we don't recognize your power to implement a certain policy or to enforce a certain perspective or rule. And I think that this is something that's important for us to start considering, to be recognizing where in our lives we just comply without challenge. And there's something to be said for that consensus in terms of creating order. For instance, if we didn't comply with the rules of traffic and driving, it would be pure insanity, right? We would have casualties and we would have injuries and chaos, right? And there are rules that need to be rewritten. There are laws that need to be rewritten, for example. And we're seeing a big movement in that direction. For instance, with the Green Amendment movement and the rights of nature movement and the Our Children's Trust movement, where people are looking to enact new laws that preserve foundational rights to health and a clean environment. And then when these laws are in place, or these amendments to the Bill of Rights within state constitutions, then other laws that may exist in contradiction to those rights can then get challenged, and policies that exist in contradiction to those rights can get challenged. And when we're dancing with authority, it is often the case that that authority is an assertion. It's just an assertion. So in interpersonal power dynamics, where one person asserts their authority often through attempts at domination and control and manipulation, that authority stands due to our refusal to challenge it. And it's not to say that there aren't consequences to challenging these authorities. There are. However, there are ways perhaps that they can still be challenged effectively over time. So when we talk about making real change, what we need to be looking at is the underlying assumptions, the unexamined assumptions of authority, of power, of paradigm, the underlying assumptions of the way things are. So in the fracking fight in New York State, a dear friend challenged all the norms, including the um, the authority that was exerted by a number of environmental groups that were saying you can't end fracking. It's not going to happen. It's because we're talking about consensus reality. There's a so the consensus reality was you can't end fracking. You can only regulate it. And this visionary woman, Helen Slotjay, said no, no, we're going to end it. And it took a long time, and there was lots of flack from professional colleagues, from environmental groups, from opposing groups. And yet, and she was told that it was absolutely impossible to achieve the outcome that she did ultimately achieve. But she challenged the authority. She challenged the powers that be. She challenged the power of the consensus reality to actually make a choice that wasn't on the map, essentially. And so many of us cede our power by remaining in the box about available choices, for example, rather than generating something beyond those boundaries, like Helen did, where she conceived of the fact that indeed fracking could be ended. It didn't have to be tolerated. It could be ended. And if you look in New York State, there's no fracking, which is rather miraculous. It's the choosing the choice that's not on the table. And she and I have had conversations about how it's like, here are the choices. You can have boiled peas, you can have steamed peas, you can have mashed peas, you could have fried peas, and those are the choices. But in fact, what about carrots? I would like to have carrots. I don't want peas. I don't care how you fix them. I don't want them. And we do have these choices, and there's profound power in exploring those choices, discovering those choices, and exercising those choices. And not just assuming that this unacceptable selection of choices is all that's available. What we get to do is to think creatively, to move beyond the constraints of the container that's presented to us, to say, well, wait a second, maybe we can reimagine this. Maybe there are options other than opposing each other head on. Maybe there are options of some kind of reconciliation here that hasn't even been conceived of. Maybe there are solutions awaiting us on the horizon that we just need to be willing to take the road less traveled, to question the status quo. Because if we look around, we can see that the status quo has gotten us into a pretty rocky place. And if we look at, for instance, our structures of law and governance, you know, we can recognize that corporations have more power than people, for example. And what's wrong with that picture? And we've kind of come to accept that that's the way things are. But is that something that we should be accepting? uh, so many of us had come to accept that the way things are is that that polluters get to pollute, that fossil fuel companies get to steal land and destroy communities because that's business. We come to be complacent about, well, that's just the way things are. I can't do anything about it. And when we abdicate power, our power of choice to be engaged, to choose to make a difference, when we abdicate our individual authority, then then we get the kind of situation that we're living with, that we have opportunities to disrupt a toxic system, that we have opportunities to exercise movement to change, to true change, to true transformation. And the unfortunate thing with power and the way that we interact with it is the model of power that we typically subscribe to is one of domination and control. It's one of oppression, of hierarchies, rather than the power of a collective. And when we talk about consensus reality, there's huge power in that, not generally to our betterment, but in many cases it is. Like if we go back and talk about the traffic idea, consensus reality about stopping at red lights and using turn signals and all of that becomes a useful container so that we can have greater safety. And the thing is that we elect to comply with that system. So we empower that system with our consent. And when there is an unjust system and we dissent rather than consent, there's power in that as well. So I think in these very challenging times, when there's a lot of disruption, there's a lot of discord, it requires us to rise into greater presence, greater responsibility, greater engagement in shaping the world that we choose to live into, rather than the world that we're choosing to escape. And one of the things that I've seen in our traditional realm or container of power is that the model stays the same. It's just that the powerful, the people in the place of power, switch around. So the oppressed become the oppressor, because we don't have a different model for how to exercise that power, for how to demonstrate power, for how to utilize power. And because it's very much mired in the notion of power over instead of power together. So one of the things that arose for me in this conversation about power is that if we look at, for instance, electrical power, we're talking about current, something that's moving, something that's an energy. And if we were to look at power in that way, that it's this energy that is moving in some way, shape, or form, it allows us access to different ways of thinking. That we look at alternative energy. What if power is that energy? Like the power empowering, or powering a vehicle, the power that's harnessed to move that vehicle. And I think if we look at power as energy, it may give us greater access to recognizing our own power. When we're passionate about something, there's tremendous power in that passion. When we're clear, there's tremendous power in that clarity. And that power can be rerouted. It can be redirected. That it's an energy that maybe can be channeled, but it can't necessarily be held. When it's stagnant, it's not doing its job. It's not creating an impact. It's latent. I'm exploring this idea of power as energy, as an energy source. And when I have a sense that there's something very rich available from that vantage point, from that concept, that may give us better access to our own power, to the power of group, to be able to be creating meaningful change, meaningful transformation. But we don't want to necessarily perpetuate the structures of power, the conceptualization of power that we have. People say, well, this person's powerful, that person's powerful, this organization is powerful. And I think we get to look at, well, what is it that makes them full of power? Or are they holding the potential for that power? So we often will say things like money is power. Well, money is an expression of power when it's utilized in particular contexts, right? So I think questioning what we conceive of as power is a useful exercise, because we often will use power, or someone else's power, or the power of a system, to denature ourselves, to disempower ourselves, or to give ourselves a pass on being engaged with something because we can't affect change. There's too much power there. I can't do anything about it. So we absolve ourselves of the responsibility to engage. So I invite you to just look into this idea of power. What does it mean to you? How does it show up in your life? How does it show up where you're at the effect of it from others? And notice how in many cases we bestow that power on others and remove it from ourselves. So anyway, that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And please like and follow the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel, and my YouTube channel. The links are in the chat. In the description. And as always, it's such a gift and a pleasure to be able to spend this time with you and be exploring what it is to be human. So until next time, so much love to you.